Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Miller. I'm the forum chairperson. George Bledsoe is helping us with the technology. Sherry Wright is up here helping us today as well, because it's always a problem. Next week's forum will be Common Ground's new campaigns, and the speaker will be Kevin Solomon. Also, we're planning now for the spring session, and so if you have any ideas that you would like to suggest, you need to get them to me. My email is in the church directory, and my last name is spelled M-U-E-L-L-E-R. But remember that if you make a suggestion, you have to do the work of getting the speaker and making sure that they have some sort of a write-up for publicity. So I think without, how are we doing, George? Are we okay? Okay. Bruce Wiggins will now introduce our speaker for today.
Good morning. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, the general manager of our local NPR station, David Lee. When the forum committee met, I was told that not in our 50-plus years of history with our forum have we had a speaker from WUWM, and I was shocked. And with the current situation with the federal government and so on, I thought this would be timely for all of us. I first met David when we were both involved in food work. David was executive director of Feeding Wisconsin, the network of food pantries, and he was on the Outpost board, along with Pat McFarland, a member here, and David was actually the president of the board of Outpost. So I was surprised to learn that he'd moved to WUWM, but then I heard the program on Thursday afternoons, the Chancellor's Report, that maybe some of you have listened to, and he interviewed David and talked a little bit more about his background, so I understood how he got here. I'll let David talk a little bit more about that journey, as well as the challenges that we've all heard about. So without further ado, David Lee. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this rainy morning. Fall has finally arrived, which is great. I'm just incredibly grateful to have this invite and to be able to speak with everybody here about what's been happening out in the slow news world of public media. Just a couple of framing notions for you to kind of have in your mind as we go through this process. As Pat reminded me as we were just sort of like talking right before the start, Susan Stamberg just passed away last week, and she was one of the founding mothers of NPR. So this Thanksgiving, if you have an opportunity to make Mama Stamberg's turkey dressing, cranberry sauce, you may want to give that a go. But I mentioned Susan not only because she recently passed away as a founding mother, but those of you may or may not know, Wisconsin is the home of public radio. We have the longest running public radio station in the nation, WHA in Madison. And as an idea, in 1917, as radio was sort of becoming a thing, Madison decided or figured out that radio would be a great way to kind of transmit educational programming over the radio waves across the state. And that's how public radio essentially started, right? It was, particularly in Wisconsin, it was a pathway to do Wisconsin School of the Air. And that's why the first ever NPR employee, a man by the name of Jack Mitchell, is a Wisconsinite, is a Madisonian. And the person who wrote the NPR mission statement, Bill Siemering, who is the person who is the first executive producer of All Things Considered, also a Madisonian, or some Prairie, I guess, so close enough. So we have a rich history of public radio here in the state. And as many of you listen to Wisconsin Public Radio, it is the statewide network of public radio stations here in Wisconsin. WUWM is not a part of that network. We are independent, but that doesn't make us different necessarily, right? We are just, we're not a part of the state network of public radio stations. But we do collaborate and we do talk to each other, and we are, in this current moment, really in an existential fight for the future of public radio. And so I have a little bit of just an overview of the slow news year that's been, and I'd love to entertain any questions that people might have about the world. But as Bruce mentioned, if you had asked me 2 years ago, when I was offered this position to lead our city's public radio station, that within 2 years I'd be leading a top performing NPR station in the city that I lived in through this existential moment of public broadcasting, would I still want this job? The answer is a resounding yes. Because what more important thing can we do right now in this current moment to ensure that our community has a publicly owned source of facts, of quality local reporting, national news and international programming, so that everybody in the community can have can build a consensus-based reality of the world that we live in? There's nothing more important. And I knew I wanted, well, looking back, right? I didn't know that I wanted to be in this fight, but now looking back, definitely want to be in this fight. For those of you who don't know, actually, just by a quick show of hands, who's a listener? Who's a member? Who's a giving member? Oh, so it's most of us. This is not usually how it goes, right? Because when you think about the broadcast footprint of WWM, we reach about 1.5 million people as far north as Sheboygan, as far west as Madison, and as far south as Gurnee. That's the people in our broadcast region. We have a weekly average listenership of about 100,000 people, and that's going back up since the administration has, come into force. But only 7,000 people are donors. So 7% of our listenership are donors. And well, I'm going to come back to that a little bit later, but that's an important idea for you guys to keep in mind. You are in the minority of people, and the people who didn't raise your hand as being donors, now's a great time to think about joining, because this is what's been going on over the last year. You may remember shortly after the inauguration, I think the day after the inauguration, the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, who was one of the authors of Project 2025, announced an investigation into the underwriting practices of public media. So what does that mean? It means that for all public media stations, we can't broadcast commercials. Right? We can broadcast sponsorship thank yous to companies that give us donations. So if I always use Paul's Jewelers as an example because they're on our air quite a bit. But when Paul's makes a donation to the station, we can thank them by saying, thanks to Paul, programming comes to you with support of Paul's Jewelers. That is not payment for a commercial. It is a thank you for a donation. And we have to follow very strict FCC rules in how we say these thank yous to ensure that they don't fall into inducements to buy, right? We can't say, go to car lot X today, now, because we have half-off cars, right? Like, that's a commercial, whereas we can say, thank you to car lot X for supporting programming on the station.
And that's a matter of federal law?
That's federal law, that's right. And so the FCC subpoenaed NPR and 20 large stations across the nation to get 5 years of underwriting copy to investigate copy practices. This is shortly after the inauguration. You might wonder, the FCC oversees broadcast licenses. Interesting that NPR doesn't have a broadcast license. So NPR doesn't actually fall into the jurisdiction of the FCC. Local stations do, though, and every 1,500 local stations broadcast NPR programming. So if they catch NPR doing a thing, then everybody, right, is sort of implicated on that. Another interesting thing about this investigation is that typically FCC investigations are responsive, they're reactive. So you all may remember when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson had the thing on the Super Bowl back in the late 2000s. People called the FCC and said, hey, we saw something that we shouldn't have seen. Or if somebody says a bad word over the air, somebody will call and say, hey, somebody said a bad word. This was a proactive investigation, which means the FCC decided to initiate the investigation. There was no complaint. So that started going. For about a week, I was nervous as anybody can be about whether or not we would get one of those letters. We were not one of the stations that got one of those letters. But again, if they are looking at the 20 largest stations and also NPR, so if any of them are in it and they're found guilty, everybody is, right? Because we're broadcasting all that. We're broadcasting some of that programming. That is ongoing. NPR and the stations and the stations that have been kind of rounded up have all complied, and it's ongoing. Interesting that when you also fire a bunch of people in federal agencies, it's hard to get things done. And so that's kind of sort of holding this up. In March, you may remember that Congress passed a continuing resolution to avert a government shutdown. That continuing resolution would have funded the government until the end of September. And in that continuing resolution, so the shutdown that we're in right now, that continuing resolution funded public broadcasting for the next 2 years, okay? So this is an important point because we're gonna get into like a little bit of the weeds. When they passed that continuing resolution, they funded essentially, they promised the 2027 year of funding for public broadcasting, because CPB, which is the independent nonprofit that funds public broadcasting, which was chartered in 1967, is funded through this thing called two-year advance appropriation, which means that any year they pass a budget, they're promising funding for 2 years from now. So they do this to insulate the CPB from changing whims of administrations, which is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Thank you, Bruce. Which is the mechanism that funds all of the public broadcasting stations in the nation. So that means that in this year's federal fiscal budget, which is the one that we're in the shutdown right now, so federal fiscal year 26, that money was guaranteed or was passed in fiscal 24. Does that make sense? So in fiscal 25, which is this last year, we were budgeting for fiscal 27. So theoretically, there were 2 years of funded programming for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, $1.1 billion over those 2 years, so about $550 million a year. So when they passed that continuing resolution in March, we were like, oh, there's 2 years of glide path potentially, right? Because they passed it, and typically when you pass these budgets, they don't come back to get them. And then a few weeks later, maybe a month or two later, the White House put out an executive order to defund, to essentially defund NPR and PBS. And we thought to ourselves, oh, that's fascinating. There was no call for rescission, right? This idea of clawing back funds. NPR quickly sued the administration over what they believed was an unlawful executive order. And what's interesting is that there's actually very little federal dollars going to CPB. I'm sorry, there's very little federal dollars going to NPR and PBS directly. There's a program through the Department of Education called Ready to Learn, which funds the developmental programming, the program development for shows like Sesame Street and those programs. And then there's satellite funds to NPR to oversee the satellite. Those are the only federal dollars that go directly to NPR and PBS. And that's what the executive order said. You have to cut those, the federal government can't fund NPR and PBS. The vast majority of the funds goes to CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is an independent nonprofit funded by all of us, right? So I don't know how the administration felt about that, but I think they were like, kind of like, oh, that's weird. And then a few weeks later, news came out that the president would ask Congress to formally rescind funds for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. These are, again, promised funds from the last 2 years' budget cycles. That went through a lot of back and forth. Many of you may have gotten emails from us about why it's important for you to reach out to your elected officials about this. And over the course of 2 months, six weeks, 8 weeks, and 3 votes, on July 18th, the Senate passed the amended version to cut funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, thus zeroing out, clawing back promised funds to public broadcasting, starting in the end of this federal fiscal year, which would have been September 30th, 2025. So that's where we are. So October 1st of this last year, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, was the first day in 58 years where the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has not been in existence. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting was chartered in 1967 through the Public Broadcasting Act to grow the movement of public broadcasting in America, and for 58 years has been meeting that mission every day by ensuring that local stations have the funds to develop their own programming, acquire programming, to meet the educational, cultural needs of their local communities. And so I think this brings up for me some really interesting questions, right? Like, what does it mean to be public when there are no public funds for public broadcasting? It used to be that every single American gave us about $1.60 every year in their taxes, in the amount of money that we got from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's no longer true anymore, right? I would respond, I have and will continue to respond to every angry email I get from a listener who says that our content is biased or slanted in one way or the other, whether or not they're a paying member or not, because we have that promise to our community. Because we're owned by everybody. We were owned by everybody. Now, I think it's more appropriate to say that we're owned by 7,000 people, right? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for this community? I'm of the opinion that if we're owned by one person, 7,000 or 600,000 in the metro, in Milwaukee, in the city of County Milwaukee, we still have to hold that promise of being publicly owned, no matter who's actually writing those checks. Because we're in a moment right now where 5 billionaires own every media organization in the country, right? I don't know if it's actually 5, but it feels like it's 5. You may have seen the recent news about the CBS Skydance, the Paramount Skydance merger. That's Larry Ellison and his son and his family owning essentially all of the legacy CBS brands. They're talking about potentially merging with Warner Discovery, which means they'll own CNN. And they're in talks to buy TikTok, the American operations for TikTok. That is an unprecedented amount of power to control what people see, what they get to hear, and what they get to know. That's bad for everybody. It's not a Democrat or Republican or independent or whatever. That's bad for everybody. And that's why public ownership, local ownership of news is so important. And I would say that we are one of the last ones in this community that operates at the scale, that operates an award-winning local newsroom and broadcasts national and international news 24 hours a day. We have 168 hours of time to fill every week. Up until, and we will continue to do that, right? So when I think, so many of you might be wondering, how is this rescission going to impact us? We got about 6% of our annual budget from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's about $350,000 a year. And due to, I think the generosity of our community and the commitment that I know that is out in the community for us, we are working to navigate this moment without cuts to programming or staffing immediately. But we need to raise that gap, right? Because we're starting at a $350,000 hole that we, you know, going into budgeting for this year, were kind of up in the air about, right? Like we had made our staffing plans, we had made our programming plans, and then this hole happened. I think, you know, between us, I also believe that we can't cut our way to prosperity in this moment, right? When you think about all the stuff that's happening out in the world, we cannot cut our way to prosperity right now. We're already incredibly lean. We have 37 people to do all of the work of the station. We're already incredibly lean. Once we start cutting staff and programming, that just creates a spiral, right? Because what the community depends on us for is that award-winning local news, national and international programming. And we don't have a lot of places to cut unless it's from the people who are providing that coverage. But again, like I said, we have to make that up. And stations across the nation are beginning to figure this out, or beginning to experience these cuts. 2 stations have already announced their closure. They are PBS stations, and largely PBS stations have a larger balance sheet, right? They have more infrastructure, it just costs more money. It's projected that maybe 15% of stations across the nation might have to figure out how to either cut back or close. And since the passage of the Rescission Act, about 430 jobs have been cut throughout the system. We are committing to not do that. But again, that depends on our community being able to help us fill that gap. During our fall member drive, this is our first member drive post-rescission. We had a modest goal of raising $80,000. We raised 170-ish, which is 2x, which is great. And that was just during the member drive, right? Like there has been just a great velocity in engagement over the last few months. That has to continue, because what we're a little bit afraid of is that is this just different gifts that are coming in at a different time, right? So maybe everybody who's going to give at the end of the year or in March decided to move their gifts up to September. We need those gifts in at the end of the year and in March and continued on, right? So before I forget, I know many of you, the vast majority of you in here are already members. If you can, really consider increasing your membership, because there are there are a lot of folks who have been engaged with us who have been able to increase, and that's been an incredible boon. If you're a yearly donor, consider becoming a monthly donor, because that helps give us the planning for the sort of consistent revenue so that we can ensure that we can pay all of our bills on time. And if you're the handful of people in here who are not members, now's a great time, like I said, to think about joining. I oftentimes think about, and many of you probably heard me say this, right? But like, I have so many subscriptions in my personal life that I don't use. And it is, when you think about a subscription to information, a subscription to community, a subscription to democracy, I think it's worth $10, $20 a month, which is probably what you'd pay for Netflix. So this is what. So how are we going to turn this ship around? This is the last part of my talk before turning over to questions. We have three big bets right now about how we're going to turn the ship around in a post CBB world. The first one is we have to continue to transform our operations from being a legacy 60-year-old public radio station to being a multimedia, publicly owned, multi-platform organization for the 21st century. What does that mean? It means that while our radio operations will continue to be strong, we have to build new digital channels to reach people in the ways that they're being reached now. The vast majority of people right now get their news through YouTube. The vast majority of people also get their podcasts through YouTube, curiously. YouTube is the largest television provider in the world, and we need to figure out how to get into those lanes, right? It's not to say that all of our programming is going to be on digital channels, but we have to collide with people in ways that where they're at right now, right? Like I think about the way I found public radio. I was driving my car, and I was turning the station to the left, and I found Morning Edition and All Things Considered, and it sparked my curiosity and provided me with lifelong learning, right? Probably the same for many of you in here. People don't turn the radio to the left anymore. That is not a thing that people do. They scroll, right? And so we need to figure out how we can get our programming in that scroll algorithm, essentially. We have to figure out our relation, and in that, we have to figure out our relationship with NPR, right? Because for the last 55 years or so, NPR and us have been broadcast partners. And we used to have a monopoly on NPR programming. If you wanted to hear NPR programming, Morning Edition, All Things Considered, Fresh Air, you had to come to 89.7. That's no longer true, right? We're now navigating this world where we are operating more like frenemies. That's a little bit too strong. We're operating more like slight competitors, right? Because you can get NPR programming on NPR One or any other digital platform that they provide. We need to get our local content onto those digital platforms so you come back to us, right? Like these are the little things in this digital transformation world that we need to kind of figure out. And these are all relationship questions. But it is incredibly important for us to become more digital facile, with more video assets to be in a world where a place like YouTube, which considers podcasts as video content where the images are optional, um, we have to live in that world, right? We have to be able to compete in that world. The second thing that we're betting on is that we need to better serve your needs, and we believe through some consumer research that what you want is more local programming. Right now we have one local show, Lake Effect, which runs every day at noon, and we have our award-winning newsroom that does deep contextual reporting about the region. That is about 5% of our broadcast clock. I don't think we win doing 5% of our broadcast clock of local content. We have to increase that percentage of with content produced by local creators or about our local community. And so when I say local community, I don't mean just Milwaukee, I mean the region and potentially the state. And so we have some exciting news coming up in a few weeks where we will be adding at least 2 shows which will help to increase that local engagement. And we're going to be doing that without any increase to our budget, which is a trick, right? Which is a magic trick to figure out how to do. We need to be what I think you all think of us as the voice of Milwaukee, as the audio home of Milwaukee. We have to be able to show up like that with our programming. You're also going to see more local programming in new ways, right? So when you think about not just radio, potentially new email newsletters in the way of getting our news and content out to you in different ways outside of just the radio. We have to figure out how we are more integrated into your lives. And we are working on that, and good news coming in a few weeks. The third thing that we're doing is late this year or early next, we're going to be launching our first marketing campaign in probably 15 years. That is a really important moment for us, because when I talk to other public radio GMs and I ask them, what are the things that you're not doing? How do we turn this this engagement question around? They always say to me, we need to do more marketing. And I say, well, how's that been going for you? And they're like, oh, we don't invest in marketing because every dollar would be wasted if we're not investing in our newsroom. And I'm like, well, how's that working out for you, right? Like, how's that working out for your audience, for your awareness, for your revenue? They're like, yeah, not that great. We have to invest in marketing. And so if, as part of that consumer research that I told you a little bit about, what we know is that when people know us, they love us. We spoke to 2,000 people in our broadcast region, 1,000 members and 1,000 non-members. And when people know us, invariably across the board, they love us. The problem is nobody knows us. And that is true not just for the local station, but it's true for public radio across the country. It's true for NPR, just as it is true for us. In fact, unaided awareness of public radio and the NPR brand across the nation is at 8%. Unaided awareness for WUWM is at 12%. So a little bit better, but it needs to be more. And so we're going to be launching an awareness campaign timing is unclear right now, but to help people kind of wrestle with this question of what's it like to have a few billionaires own all of your news? And is that something that you like or want? Because that's the world that we're living in. And so the only way to have another world is to invest in your only publicly owned, publicly shared resource for information in our community, and that's us. I'd be happy to take any questions. Oh my God. Let's start with Pat, because I know she's probably raring to go, and then we'll go this way.
David, thank you. We're so happy that you accepted this know you may be cautious in giving feedback about that, but what are your thoughts? And also, finally, I'm asking all of us, each one reach one. Ask other
Yeah.
people to contribute.
Thank you, Pat. So the question was, what my thoughts are about Wisconsin Public Radio and some of their recent format changes. Wisconsin Public Radio lost $6 million in the rescission for CPB. They have a much larger footprint, a much larger network. I think their decision to shift WHAD from a mixed format, so NPR and classical, to all classical, was a recognition that we're covering and serving the Milwaukee area well, right? And so there's no reason to force you to choose between listening to On Point at 11 a.m. on WHAD or with us at 9 at WWM. So we are trying to figure out how we better serve members of our community, and I think that's actually a powerful way of us kind of working together to do that. We'll get to you. We're going to go this way. I think I saw. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. You. Yeah.
Do you have a relationship with Wisconsin Watch? It's doing,
Investigative reporting? Sure. The question is whether or not we have a relationship with Wisconsin Watch. We do. We have a content sharing agreement where content that they put up, we can repost. I think there are opportunities for us to partner more deeply and share resources more deeply, but we haven't fully kind of explored that or looked or figured out what that might mean. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you might have kind of, I just wondered what the relationship was between WUWM and WPR. It sounds like you're just totally separate affiliates.
We are separate. WPR is the statewide network, and we are, for the vagaries of how this system was built, we are just not in the Wisconsin Public Radio Network. We have historically not talked a lot together. And that this predates me, right? So I think it is not, I'm not speaking out of school to say that the relationship has not always been great, but it has been improving, and we are in regular communication on how we partner. And we have some very exciting partnerships potentially to announce in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Going back, yes, in the blue. Yeah, for sure. So the question was, who owns YouTube, and what was the recent merger that I noted? Yeah. So Google owns YouTube, and the recent mergers is in the last week. The Ellison family, which owned this movie studio called Skydance, bought or merged with Paramount. Paramount Viacom owns CBS, CBS News, and all of the Paramount Entertainment brands, right? So when you think about the corporate consolidation, there's just like one entity's own a lot of different things. So that happened, and they have installed, as you may have read, Barry Weiss, who was the former editor of the Free Press, as the leader of CBS News, and that's been an interesting few weeks for Ms. Weiss in that new job. So that happened. They are also in talks of buying, so Skydance, the Ellison family, are also in talks for buying Warner Brothers Discovery, which also owns CNN and a host of other media brands. Because Larry Ellison also owns Oracle, they're the leading company in talks of taking over the US operations of TikTok. So that's one family owning owning a lot of stuff. And you know, far be it for me to bang on somebody's ability to acquire things, but that's just a lot of consolidation that doesn't feel great. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm a geriatric Luddite,
Yeah.
but what I'm thinking is, and I agree with you that you need to find new ways to reach the public. And the younger public are listening to podcasts like Joe Rogan, Howard Stern, who's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Can WUWM compete on that model, or maybe even have in-studio cameras, or is that a ridiculous question and it's best not to compete on that ground?
I think where we win is providing information that people can trust and can believe in. And you know, I would characterize somebody like Joe Rogan or Howard Stern as entertainment products, right? And entertainment products that masquerade as current events and news. I mean, it's current events entertainment. I don't think that's a place that we would compete in, and I don't think that's a place that we need to expand in. But I do think what we can do is having cameras in studios so that when we're doing a member drive or we're interviewing the mayor or whatever it might be, that people can see it, because that's how people build relationships with folks. I think this is outside of my span of control at the station because of the editorial firewall. I think there are interesting opportunities for us to expand our platform to local creators that also share in the mission that we have, right? Which is to share information and smart conversation with our community. I oftentimes have noted to our staff, our editorial staff, what would it be like to partner with, you know, local niche information influencers, right, who meet our editorial standards, but have a rabid, you know, following of 5,000 people, right? Like if you get 10 of them, that's 50,000 people coming into our fold that we may not have had before. Ensuring that sort of editorial standard is met, I think, is kind of the trick that we have to meet. We're going to come back around, but we're going to go.
Just a quick comment on
Yeah.
public television. CP, you said we're paying $1.60 a year. In Britain, they pay $100 per year per person, which explains why we're really a parasite on the BBC. So we're not really, you know,
Yeah.
one.
No. So the comment was the fact that other nations, other countries invest far more in their public broadcasting than in America, and that's 100% true. There's some, and you know, this isn't a partisan statement. This is a data point. The countries that have more investment in public broadcasting show higher rates of democracy, right? And I don't know why that is, but that's just what the data suggests. I think there's a question back there, and then we're going to come back around. Yes.
In addition to being one, still turns the dial to WWM.
Yeah.
I really rely now on emails from NPR
Yeah.
news because I will start sometimes with the New York Times for a bit, but you know I get too upset.
Yeah.
So, can you, in a short fashion, tell us what's happening with their funding, NPR's funding, in the way you told us about what's happening to WWM?
Yeah, for sure. The question is, what is the impact on NPR's funding through rescission? That's a complicated question. 1% of NPR's funding came from the CPB. The vast majority of that was for like training and kind of other administrative programs that it's programmatic funding. 1% of a $350 million budget, by the way. It gets complicated because local stations provide the vast majority of NPR funding, right? We pay NPR $500,000 a year to be a member and to be able to broadcast the programs that we broadcast. And if you multiply that over the thousands of NPR stations, that's about $100 million in local station funding. And if stations start to pull back on their dependence on NPR or close, you can see that's a bit of a spiral for them. That's something they're really worried about. And they're also worried about the fact that that stations are also beginning to kind of consider that value proposition now, right? Because, like I said, we are friendly competitors that understand that our fates are intertwined, but also have a hard time kind of agreeing on the rules of the road. You guys shouldn't care, right? You should be able to get to your programming in the way that is best suited for you without caring about our business rules, right? And so that's something we're trying to figure out. If you want to donate to NPR, you would go to npr.org, donate to them. Very likely that money is going to just come back to us. If you choose the right local station, right? So that's I will also, that's how you would donate to NPR. You go to npr.org, donate to them. Likely that money is going to come back to us depending on what front door you walk through. But if you want to support NPR, the best way to do that is to donate to us, because we end up writing that check back to them, and with the cash in our hands, we're the best. We have the best ability to direct the funds to best serve all of you. Sorry about that. That keeps happening. To best serve all of you. The other complexity of that question that you asked is that CBB also funds the satellite system, which is about $50 million over the next 3 years. You may have read about a lawsuit right now that NPR is engaged in they're continuing to sue the administration, but CBB is caught in the middle, and it's about this satellite funding. It's really weedy, but the thing that you need to know is that the management of the satellite will be taken care of. We'll still be able to get your NPR programming out to you in the ways that you've always had it. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. So it's 11 o'clock for those of you who need to go to the 11 o'clock service. Go ahead. David's agreed to stay a little longer so we can continue with the discussion. Thank you, David.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yep.
And I get a million solicitations. Help me identify how I should make a contribution to your organization.
Yeah. The question was how, for somebody who's making a required minimum distribution, how would you do that to the organization? I would get you in touch with our development office. They have directions for how you can tell your Fidelity or whomever has your 401k where to send the dollars. It's a really easy form to fill out. I'm sorry? Oh. I will. I'll get your information afterwards, and I'll connect you to. I'll connect you with our development folks. Yes, Bruce.
I was thinking that perhaps the rescission of the loss of federal funding might allow more freedom and opportunities. But then I thought, well, there still are requirements through the FCC and other laws. So how does that balance happen?
Yeah. That's a really great question. So the question is, with rescission, we're no longer beholden to the requirements of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is true. However, we are still an FCC licensee, so we still have to follow all the rules as it relates to federal licensure of our broadcast signal. And then, as you heard at the beginning of my talk, there's increased scrutiny over our broadcast practices. So that's a weird thing. I will note that who listens to us on a smart speaker? Anybody? Or just on the radio? So you don't tell Alexa to play WUWM, or you do? When you do that, you're actually not listening to us on the radio. You're actually listening to our internet stream. So we have an app that you can play on your telephone. That's our internet stream. That broadcast is not regulated by the FCC. Only our over-the-air signal is. And so if something bad were to happen over the FCC's investigations, that's not there are other pathways to reach. We're not there yet. I'm just saying that as a note. I think the other thing that's interesting, though, so we're following all the rules, and the scrutiny is just a lot higher right now from the FCC. I think the other thing that I think is, again, going back to the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, is without a central office to basically hold our financial data, hold training, hold accountability, this question of like what it means to be public really is an open question, right? I can stand up here and say, we will continue to stay accountable to every last person in our listening region because I think it's the right thing to do. But who's going to keep me accountable to that? Who's going to keep us accountable to that, right? We had to prove certain things to the CPB in order to get funding year over year. And that sort of common record of truth, right, is no longer with us, right? 58 years of data, 58 years of institutional knowledge is 70% of their 70 employees ended their jobs at the end of September 30th, right? And they're gonna wind down in January. And I often hear, well, let's just wait till the midterms. Even if they pass another funding package to restart public broadcasting, it's going to look different. It's not going to have as much money as it did, likely, and it's going to take a year or two to start again, right? So we're at least 2 to 4 years out of getting back to the status quo ante, and that's we're in it, right? There's nothing coming to save us except us, and this community, and I think that's a thing that we have to reckon with. And then
you mentioned that you're going to be starting a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
It sounds like something you're going to take out the box on. I'm just wondering what a marketing campaign might look like under the circumstances.
The question was what a marketing campaign might look like given this current moment. It's going to be about local ownership of your news. You may know the folks at SRH who are helping us with this. So they're cooking up a campaign that's going to be fun and exciting and in some ways safely provocative, if that makes sense. More to come. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I think it's in many ways it's gonna look like us, and in some ways it's not gonna look like us. And remember, you all are our core audience, right? As we're trying to raise awareness and trying to like make a bigger tent. This marketing campaign, or at least the front door of the marketing campaign, may not be for you. But what you need to know is that what's the core is still the same thing, right? We're still here serving the community with award-winning local news, national and international programming. We're, yeah,
Ask really quickly.
yeah, yeah.
Are you looking to connect with community partners? Is that maybe something that?
Yes, for sure. We should definitely chat afterwards. We're gonna go over there and then we're coming to you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just, this doesn't seem a big deal to get used to in light of current circumstances, but, every NPR affiliate I listen to do have corporate sponsors and
Yeah.
corporate, foundations and people who maybe want to exert an influence. So how do you address that from a journalistic perspective?
Yeah. What a really great question. We've been dealing with that right now. And I will share something. One of my core values is transparency, and so I'm happy to be transparent about this issue. We have Enbridge as a corporate sponsor right now. You may or may not agree with what Enbridge is doing, or may not agree with what's happening with the Line 5. But the thing you need to know is that because of the journalistic firewall, our reporters, our environmental reporter, has freedom to continue reporting on Enbridge and the Line 5 and whatever is going on up there to her heart's content. And if Enbridge called me up and said, hey, you need to stop this story or kill this story, I would say, sorry, that is not within your span of control. Your span of control is to give us dollars, and our span of control is to put it on the air, and it's within the span of control of our reporters to report. And I think tricky relationships require careful communication, transparency, and clear boundaries. And I think from our perspective, all of our corporate sponsors are treated in that same way. That like we have a policy for underwriting and corporate sponsorship that helps us determine what we accept and what we don't accept and why. But for the journalistic integrity of our journalistic product, there's a strict firewall that doesn't get breached. Yes, ma'am.
Do you give talks like this to other groups in Milwaukee?
Yes. So
Do you have a business card?
it's funny. I can give you my information. I've gotten to the time in my career where now I have a QR code. So if you have a cell phone, we can scan it. But I can give you my information for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
because, I come from St. John's on the Lake.
Yeah.
We have
Yep.
over 450 vet residents.
Yeah.
Who come from all over the US.
For sure.
And I think it's a very valuable.
We would love to visit. They are one of our strongest and most valued corporate sponsors.
Well, we have 2 different programs where I'm thinking you could give a presentation.
Yeah, I would love to, for sure. We will definitely be in touch. Yes.
Are there other stations in Wisconsin like WUWM that weren't under the WPR network?
Yeah.
And is there something to be said for collaborating more with them? I raise this question only because I feel like Madison and Milwaukee
Yeah.
do not communicate enough.
Yeah.
And we lose a lot of our power because of that.
Yeah.
Because we're in our own little world.
The question is, are there any other independent stations in Wisconsin that are outside of the WPR network? The answer is yes. There are 5 CBB-funded organizations in Wisconsin. WPR, so all of the stations within the WPR network, that's a lot, right? Us, Radio Milwaukee, WXPR in Rhinelander, and WOJB in Hayward. You may have read a couple of months ago that post-rescission, WOJB suggested that they might have to consider closing because they serve a largely rural community. If you lose 50% of your funding, it's a hard task to raise that up. We've been convening a call with all the CBB-funded organizations in the state to kind of figure out how we might be able to partner. And WOJB has been, a part of those communications. Oh, I'm sorry, another one, WORT in Madison is the 6th, so there's 6. We're trying to figure it out. There have been some very interesting conversations between WXPR and Rhinelander, WPR and us about how we might be able to collaborate on coverage for our listeners. And here locally, Radio Milwaukee and us have been talking about how we collaborate and expand our impact. Right. I think whenever this question comes up, people always say, well, people on our staff or in other stations say, well, should we collaborate given that there's all this confusion? And my response essentially is, there's already confusion. If we collaborate, at least we can talk about it. At least we can communicate about our differences and the different value that we bring to the local community. Because here's the thing, right? Like from my perspective, I don't care how you get to us. I don't care if you get to us because you love music and you come through the Radio Milwaukee door. I don't care if you come to us because you landed in Milwaukee Public Television, you're like, I actually just like radio, right? There should be a no wrong door approach, right? Like if you land with us and you're like, God, I wish you played more classical music, I would say, well, go to 90.7 WHAD. They will get you what you need, right? Again, we need to serve you better and not have you worry about our business rules and our borders. Yes, ma'am.
Let's say you decide to collaborate with Rhineland,
Yeah.
pretty rural area.
Yeah.
And we're in Milwaukee, which is very urban. Do you see any potential for healing the urban-rural divide?
The question is, if we partner with a rural station, how might we kind of think about healing the urban-rural divide? Look, if we were able to do that, I would not be here in this job. That's a big question, right? But I would say that like the only way that we would be able to do that is for people living in urban areas and people living in rural areas to understand each other better. And the only way to do that is to tell more stories and to connect the stories from each community to each other. For sure, that's right. Our mission, I should have started with our mission. Our mission is to tell stories that connect, engage, and inspire our listeners to a deeper understanding of each other, the region, and the world. And that is what you just said, right, is sort of core to our mission. And when I think about what that means practically, day to day, it is that we're telling stories that remind our community that we're still friends and neighbors, that we still, in some fundamental way, love each other, because that is the only way that we can solve problems, is that if we see the common and shared humanity that we have.
I mean, I find that exciting. I think that's great potential, hearing
Yeah.
stories. Oh, you have common things with food? Oh, you can't watch movies there?
Yeah,
You have issues, whatever.
that's right. Bruce, I think last question maybe, right? Or last comment.
Yeah. An idea maybe for more engagement that might help is to get some community people in during the annual fundraisers.
Yeah.
Not just have staff do it, but have people coming in and talking about the value they see, members, supporters, names that might be recognized.
We've been doing member testimonials, so if anybody's interested in potentially doing a member testimonial, we'd be happy to have our membership team reach out. Yeah, for sure, and that's great. I think ultimately the value of public radio is that you hear your friends and neighbors, right, on our air, and we can certainly do a better job in increasing the sound of the local sound of our air. Thank you so much. I'm happy to hang out for a bit if people still have other questions. Thank you.